Everyone, I apologize. I was stuck in traffic, but hopefully I didn't hold you up too much.
Hello, everybody. Get
Hello.
started here in just a second. Rachel, when you're ready, I'm ready.
Ready to go.
Okay, you ready to go? All right. You want to introduce me or do you want me to introduce myself?
You can go ahead and do it.
Yep. Okay. So let me get the screen share going and we'll get this launched up on here. Okay. Everybody should see the program up on the screen and let me know if you don't. Sometimes we have with computers, we have some trouble sort of transmitting over Zoom. So I just want to make sure, particularly if I move around and do things. There is a link there that is on the first page where you can download materials. There was an article I wanted to attach to those materials. I haven't attached it yet, but I'll put it in there later after the program. And you can download them again if you want to see the article. It's actually an article from the Maryland State Bar Journal, um, which we can talk about in a little bit. So today we're here on basically on AI fundamentals, ethics, and risk. And really, what this program is designed to do is it's part of a three-part program that allows us or teaches attorneys sort of how to who particularly those whether you're getting your feet wet for the first time or you're actually using it like me every day in practice, multiple for most of the day during my practice. This is going to give you sort of the view of ethics surrounding AI ethical obligations and the risks, and a little bit of information on how AI works, so that you can use it in the manner for which it's designed without some of the problems that lawyers have run into. Um, so let's see. There we go. All right. So I'm an owner of Spence Law Group in Towson, licensed in 3 states. I've been practicing 3 years. Um, I concentrate in complex litigation, including trust and estate disputes and business disputes, as well as other miscellaneous interesting cases. I'm a tech guru and AI connoisseur, as it were. I'm also a member of the Maryland State Bar Association's Task Force on AI. I've been a member 2 years now. I think I'm in my second year of that. When you go on to the website at the Maryland State Bar, you'll see some information that the task force has put together to assist attorneys. And I'll address that in a little bit. I want to make a disclaimer, and I usually don't do disclaimers in my legal presentations because many of them don't come with the what I'll call heightened sense of risk that AI comes with. Um, there's I can't really certainly can't make representations about the accuracy of AI tools. Um, you have to ensure that it complies with professional standards, and I don't want to be considered what I'll call quote an ethics lawyer. But with that said, I have spent countless hours understanding both the ethical obligations of attorneys, not just in Maryland, but nationally and in Virginia, and have also looked at the different ideas of where we could run afoul of ethics. I research case law all the time and keep update on it. In fact, I've published or about to publish in the University of Baltimore Law Journal a 47-page, I think, article on AI and ethics. And it basically it's a deep dive into ethics, which I think is going to be published within the next few weeks. Our final draft is getting turned in tomorrow. that's already been edited by them. You always want to verify AI outputs. We'll go into a lot of that later. And then if in doubt, consult ethics counsel. So again, I say this seriously. There's no definitive ethics guidance in Maryland. The ABA has not even issued an ethics decision on artificial intelligence. And I'll talk about that because there was a 2024 one that I'm intimately familiar with. However, the area of AI has changed, and I'll give you a cite to that. But the area, the concerns that they had with confidentiality have changed, and we're going to show you how to avoid those problems that their opinion discussed. Again, these are the current best practices that we know, but there's no guidance. We're sort of in the new world. I want to talk about that a little bit because I think there's a fear that lawyers have of adopting things because of this. But, at the same time, we adopted fax machines and we started using computers when people didn't really understand everything about them. And email, for instance, when I went to law school, we were just starting to use email internally at an organization, or actually externally at an organization that I worked for. But it just hadn't taken over. And now we all send emails daily without even thinking twice about ethics. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, but really it's just something to be aware of. So what is artificial intelligence? It's technology that performs tasks using human-like reasoning, decision-making, creativity. Let me get back to that. So you put in a prompt, and it spits out a result. These pictures are all generated by AI. The video that you saw at the beginning was generated by AI. I would say half of this program is generated using AI, at least to edit and to tweak some language, which is kind of how I use it in my own practice. It certainly didn't develop this, but or the structure, but it helped assisting in the developing of it. So what is generative AI? So what lawyers are going to be facing is what's called generative AI. There's different types of AI, but generative AI is really the one that lawyers and attorneys are going to see every day. It's AI that basically creates. Sorry, I just heard something. Okay, it's AI that creates new content. It basically generates information such as text, writings, based on the input and the patterns that it has developed in its training and its algorithm models. The interesting part about this, in fact, is that I guess the courts have ruled that there is no right to copyright AI, even though it's generating new content. The images are not created by a human, so you can't copyright it, which is really interesting. So when I use those pictures, they're not copyrighted. They can't be. And so that's a really interesting sort of dynamic that's going on. Generative AI learns from patterns. So if you think about it, what it does is it reads hundreds of thousands of books, millions of books. It reads LinkedIn posts. It reads Reddit, and it learns language and modeling its output based on what it reads. And it develops through those models and through training, it develops this ability to understand what comes next in a pattern. So it sees how a sentence is written, such as learns from patterns, and maybe it doesn't use that because it doesn't have a lot of, it's more of a bullet point. But it's looking at that sentence structure, and then it's saying, if I have a sentence that involves this, I'm going to predict and create that sentence based on the patterns that I've developed. And it's generation, not just retrieval. So in the old days, when you use Google, you got a response back, but it wasn't generating that response. It was just giving you a response that it already found. With the new AI, it's actually generating a response for you. A good place to see that is with Gemini and Google Search, where they do have AI responses already that you see, which kind of summarize the text search or the search that you've prompted it with to search Google. So this is really important. AI is a predictor, not a thinker. And I got in a fight today with Claude, which is one of the tools that I use. As an aside, I use 5 separate AI tools, maybe 6 daily. And one of those is Claude. Another is Gemini. Another is ChatGPT, Copilot, and we'll go through all these. But AI is a predictor. It's not a thinker. It does not reason. And part of the problems that we're seeing and that we're going to talk about today with ethics and with implementation and using AI is this exact issue. This is really something that you have to think about as you're reading the results, that sentence is based on an analysis of billions of patterns that it's developed through its training. And it's basically saying the next word in this sentence is going to be this. It is not something like what we do, which is reason a case citation and how to distinguish it or how it might it might actually apply. And it's not able to do that. It's only to look at patterns. So it can look at the word patterns of the case. It can look at the patterns of the facts that you've given it. And then it can basically predict ideas based on that, but it can't think through it and really reason it. And one of the problems with AI, the biggest problem with AI and the ethical issues is it has this, what I call the siren song, and I discussed that in my article, UB Law Journal. It really creates this belief in the user that it's accurate and that the accuracy can be relied on, and it just can't. It is absolutely something that cannot be relied on, particularly in court pleadings, absent extensive review. You're the thinker. You understand the hierarchies, jurisdiction, legality, and ethics of what you're reading. So again, it's a predictor. You're the thinker, and you really need to keep that in front of you. The crucial difference, and I like this, AI seeks plausibility, you seek precedent. And I thought that was cute. That was actually an AI clause. So when I was asking it to help me develop these thoughts, it gave me that as a cute phrase. And that's the value of AI, and I worry about the lack of writing skills for new lawyers because AI is going to replace our writing because it can do it better. I often called myself a wordsmith who would spend, hours and hours and hours writing emails and letters and briefs and really coming up with what I felt was easily understood, pleasant, light reading to the extent that you could say that for the judge and for opposing counsel. And now lawyers are just going to get beautiful writing from AI. And, that's going to be part of my next program, which is how do we use AI in a demonstration? How do you actually help it develop its wording for your particular position and how you think? Because I've found that, when you use it, it starts to understand your mind process and it starts to remember certain things about the way you like to write. One of the things was one of the first briefs, I think it was ChatGPT ever wrote me. It just talked about what a specious, fallacious, and sanctionable argument the other side made. And I don't think I've ever said that in a single pleading in my career in 30 years. It's just not how I write. So I had a long talk with ChatGPT about not doing that, sort of in a funny way. So let's give you some examples. AI is already there. We're already using it all the time. And by the way, this is some slides from about 8 months ago, October maybe, I did a program. And this is how much AI has changed because a lot of people probably are now using ChatGPT directly because 6 months ago, it was really still cutting edge. I've been using it since 2023, so I've been around with it for a while. But you get artificial intelligence answering emails and text for you, which is great. Here's the Google AI. What is AI? And it's drafting this based on its predictive patterns. Maybe it sees commonly stands for AI in a response to a question on the internet. on a Reddit forum or something like that. So based on that pattern, it writes this. So here's another one that I love. I use Google Photos. I encourage everybody to use it. Basically, you take a photo and then you click on that Ask button. So I asked it to look for business cards and it searched all my business cards. I thought that was great. This was a really funny one. What did I eat in Ocean City, Maryland? Because I was kind of just playing around with my phone. And this was a while ago. I suspect they've fixed this, but when it did it, it came up with Tide Pods, which must have been from some Reddit forum about eating Tide Pods and the dangers of it. It actually showed that up. So it was kind of it was funny, but not funny. And when I did this, I'm actually in Ocean City, Maryland now. You can probably see by the OC flag in the background and the starfish on the wall. But it's one of the things we can do. This is an interesting statistic right now that ChatGPT, which has about 70 to 80% of the market share of AI. This has over 900 million active users. I mean, think about that, 900 million active users. It's the sixth highest volume website globally, only surpassed by Google, which is number one, YouTube, which is number two, I think Facebook and one other site. It actually, it's and so it's really getting a lot of chats now. Looking at sort of where it goes, right now it's getting 18 billion prompts a week. This is why your electric bill is going up, because of the cost to power those responses and to manage the servers is just tremendous, and it's causing a lot of problems with electrical needs throughout the U.S. It's number 6 in global traffic. The interesting part about this, and this is where we come back to the lawyers, 57% of prompts that are put into ChatGPT are work related. This compared to, I want to say like 8 or 9% back, in 2020, early 2025, maybe before that. People just weren't using it for work, and now we're seeing almost 60% are being used for work, for people in work. Why does this matter for lawyers? What do we do with it? Well, you can draft faster. You can draft letters, emails, pleadings, motions, discovery. I use it to draft emails all the time, letters all the time, pleadings all the time. You basically drop a pleading that you want to respond to into ChatGPT or whatever program you're going to use, and you say write our opposition, and it usually doesn't get it right, but it starts the process and it makes the allegations and the caption and everything. So it really starts to develop it. I call it sort of what I'll call, we used to call trained monkey work, where we just had staff, they would put together some samples for a complaint, like a real simple collection complaint or a set of interrogatories that was just had the base layer. It can do that very well. It can create a base layer, and then you come in and actually it can add more to that than even a law clerk can. But it just cuts that drafting time. I mean, we're seeing that where I'm drafting. Yesterday, I drafted a trust release. I can't tell you how many hours it would have taken me to draft that, and it just cut it down by 2/3 maybe. It's just incredible what it can do. Perfect your documents, catch typos, citations, inconsistent arguments. I use this today. I actually have trained at least ChatGPT and Claude to understand what pre-flight means. Pre-flight for my, I've actually have it remembered as a rule. Pre-flight means I want you to check it. I don't want you to rewrite it. I want you to check it for typos. I want you to check it for, improper citations or inconsistencies. And in fact, I dropped my PowerPoint presentation into both ChatGPT and Claude, and they both came up with different ideas of some fixes that needed to be tweaked. Claude was interesting because at the beginning of the presentation, I had my address at 409 Washington. I gave up that lease in March. I'm right now working remote as we prepare for our move into our new office, which is being renovated on 304 Washington. So it reminded me to update that, and it knew that I had moved, and it remembered that because of my conversations with it. Um, and that becomes really powerful when you're trying to put something together. And in the old days, we might spend an hour just reading it really carefully to catch those typos. In fact, I used to give it to associates to review and to catch those typos. That was how hard that was. And I still do from an argument perspective, but from a pre-flight, it's not. Speed reviews large data sets in minutes. It used to be that you couldn't drop 2,000 pages into these things. You can now do that, and it can spit out information in spreadsheet format and give you ideas of what thematic issues are there, and also, for instance, where there might be reference to something that you care about, such as in my case, when I'm dealing with people with dementia in a contested trust and estate matter. I can drop in a medical records, and it can come back and say, here's where you want to be looking. These are the page numbers. And it can actually find that for me to give me any instance of dementia, which happens, and that could be 20 times or 20 different pages in 1,000 pages of records that it can find that. So that's super helpful. Contract analysis, spotting risks, inconsistencies, hidden catches. I do this with my contracts. Once I write them, I drop them in settlement contracts. And I put them in through different engines, and I get different responses. I say engines, platforms. I'll work with one to help me generate it, and then I'll put it through another one to help me revise it and add some more things to it that the first engine didn't think about. And then management, it's starting to do scheduling, billing, firm operations. I use Clio, which is AI, it has an AI component in the management side. It actually makes recommendations for billing at the end of the day based on emails that it sees going out the door. And it's saying, do you want to bill for this? And you can capture some time that way. So it's becoming very powerful. And I think we're really just at the beginning of this. This is a new world, and we're only just starting to see the tip of the iceberg. So we've kind of gone through this. This is how I use it. If you you can use it to extract the legal description from a deed if you want to rewrite a deed. I know a lot of times people just cut and paste it, but you can actually use it for that kind of thing. It doesn't have to just be in my practice, which is litigation. It could be any type of practice. Let's talk about attorney-specific tools, AI. You have Westlaw's CoCounsel. You have VLEX, Vincent AI. That is now, it was purchased by Clio. Clio is now pushing that through its own product, Clio, but it still stands out as a standalone model of AI. Lexis AI, and it's called Lexis Plus AI. And I say and Harvey because the next thing is funny, Harvey AI and Lexis. So what happens is Harvey is using Lexis for case citations and other things, and Lexis is using Harvey for some of its other processes, what we call agent work, where they're analyzing data and trying to understand complex issues. Lexis has pulled in some stuff from Harvey, so they're sort of borrowing from each other. And then each of them provide this. This is almost at this point becoming too trite because these programs are becoming much more sophisticated. They're actually looking at a case on intake, starting to develop your deadlines and your ideas, but also based on discovery, you feed it your strategy outlines and weak points and what discovery you need to conduct, and then all the way through trial preparation. So, again, this was last year. And now I'm looking at it from start to finish, what they call end-to-end AI in the legal field. And that's scary at some level because it's such a mind-blowing, how is that going to work for the vast majority of us? How does that work? from an ethics perspective. I want to talk about a review of these. So Vincent AI, $400 to $600 a month. I know that Clio is telling me that if I want Vincent to do research, I can pay $400 a month. And I just don't think that's worth it, but that they've been really pushing it. Lexis Plus AI, it's $199 to $600 a month, more likely on the higher end of that, probably around 300 or 400. But you also have to have the Lexis subscription. So for a lot of small firm lawyers like myself, you're not going to be able to afford it. It's too much. Westlaw Precision with co-counsel, the same thing, 225 to 500 plus Westlaw. Right there under Westlaw Precision, you're seeing the end-to-end agentic workflows. That's that really taking in cases and just working them from beginning to end. And then the same thing with Harvey AI. They bill themselves as agents for mergers and acquisition and litigation. $1,000 to $1,200 a month with a 20-seat minimum. That's going to be large firms. That's not going to be your run-of-the-mill. That's the most expensive one. But you can get some of that from Lexis. Okay. Let's talk about the general purpose. I'll just walk through these just briefly, or you can see these. You have Claude, ChatGPT, Copilot, Grok, and Gemini Advanced. The models that we're going to be looking at are $20 to $40 a month. More likely on the higher end of that, around 30 is what I'm seeing as my strike point. You can do 20 if you tweak the settings correctly. 40 tends to be on the outside limit. I think Grok is at 40, maybe a little bit more, with its higher in what I'll call enterprise security edition. I don't use Grok. I use it for images because it's really fast. It's the fastest image maker. It also does pretty well with data, but the problem with Grok is it doesn't have the security, at least at the initial level, that most people would be approaching Grok. Even Super Grok doesn't have that security level. You would have to go to Grok. I think it's called Grok Business. So what do general AI models lack? They don't shepherdize citations. They're not grounded in legal reasoning. The IRAC, in other words, they're not trained. Their models aren't trained to really apply legal reasoning. So some of those other legal specifics start to have algorithms and models that are pulling together some better legal reasoning, coupling with shepardizing through Westlaw and Lexis. The companies that are attorney specific, you're looking at zero retention privacy in the legal world, but in AI generalized world, it is not available by default. You can change some of those settings, and we'll talk about how to do that in a few minutes. And then there's leakage risk if you're not careful, and that's really what we talk about when we get to confidentiality and concerns with ethical violations. And we talk about, or at least they used to, because this was literally, Grok just fixed it in January. Claude did some funky stuff just recently. But these are some really modern stuff. In 2024, it was very difficult to get. Most models did not have what we call enterprise grade security and things like that. But now we do. General AI models, I want to talk about this. Microsoft has integration in Word, SharePoint, OneDrive, and Outlook. Why does that matter? You're like, why does that matter? I've tried to use it in Word. It doesn't work really well. I just prefer to use ChatGPT for that or Claude for that. Claude, by the way, I find them, ChatGPT and Claude, about the same, but one of them might surprise me in one day and the other one surprise me in another. But with this, with Outlook, and with SharePoint, with Copilot, I can dive in and I can ask ChatGPT to look at, I did it today, actually. I went in with Copilot and I said, look at my emails with this client. There's an issue of scheduling and coordinating this visit with an elderly parent. And I said, prepare, and there was this deed exchange that was part of that as part of a settlement. And I said, make a summary of everything I need to do to coordinate that to get this deed from the other side and prepare an assignment for a staff member. And lo and behold, it does that. It goes into my emails, it looks for it. And if I see something that it missed, which it did, it missed an email, I said, you want to also talk about that email that was just sent as well. And it went back and it fixed it. And it really is powerful because instead of going and looking for terms in Outlook, I'm now basically using it as a search engine with generative results that it can now pull information and then come back and say, here's what it is. I can also say, look at my SharePoint for summary judgment motions and write a summary judgment motion on this issue, undue influence in an inter vivos transfer, things like that. Corporate governance disputes on XYZ, and it'll go find it. Gemini Workspace does the same. And actually, ChatGPT integrates with Microsoft and Claude integrates with Google, where you can have that. But they do it through kind of the back door, and it takes longer. So I find just going directly to Copilot for me is the best move. I assume if I use Gemini, I'd probably use if I use OneDrive and Gmail and Docs, I'd probably use that. Lower cost per user, broader functionality, because obviously you can use it for a lot of stuff. But wait, will it make stuff up? Can you trust it? And can I use it ethically? These are really the big questions, and a lot of people have always kind of worried about this, and that's why we've seen reluctant presentation use of it. So lawyer has to provide competent representation. So what does this mean? This means you need to understand AI. You need to kind of come into it eyes wide open, take CLEs like this one to understand how it works and the risks, and prepare and then apply this information to use AI. If you don't apply this information, you may not be competent. One of the things I saw today as I was working on this was, talking with one of the AI engines, is they said, competency may be not using AI at this point, because I think something like 58% of lawyers are now using it or whatever. We'll talk about that. But it's almost like ignoring Outlook and ignoring email when that was happening. Could you actually be a competent lawyer without that? And I'm not sure if you could be because of the communication barriers without it. Let's talk about what the real issue. It's AI hallucinations. What it is it's statistical probability over truth. It has nothing to do with the truth. It has to do purely with statistical probability. When do we see it mostly? Leading questions. I might put in a prompt. I really like the way this sentence or this argument is. Can you help me revise it? Or can you check it for accuracy? It might say, no, this is great. Let's use it. And let me go find a case for you. And then it just makes up a case. That's what it does. And that's that sycophancy where it wants to please you. And that's part of the model training, because the algorithms are designed to keep you engaged and not get upset when they tell you something that you don't want to hear. So that's an inherent issue with AI. Again, that siren song. I'm going to lure you in by my sycophancy and my friendliness. And so you see that when it is trying to please you. And it's dangerous. And this is becoming more dangerous sort of in the legal area. What we're seeing not just improper case citations, but proper case citations which don't accurately apply the facts of the case or even the right case. They'll give you the site, it's correct. They give you the name, it's correct. But then when you read it, you're like, this case has nothing to do with that. That's contextual hallucination. That's dangerous for lawyers, obviously. You just can't rely on it. You can start with it, but just not rely on it. Real cases, fictional rooms. So in legal work, what's the risk? The risk is the Meizu risk. We're going to talk about Meizu. Many of you probably heard of this gentleman, but we'll show you a little bit more about him. So what's your defense? Verify everything. Don't trust, verify. It's not even a trust, but verify. It is don't trust, verify everything. How do you do that? Well, one of the ways I do it with Google, and which I find to be one of the most factually accurate generators, models, is I ask it to give me links. is there's some citations there's some information I'll show you in this program. I said to it, okay, well, where did you get this from? Where is this citation from? And it would give it to me and I'd read it and I'd say, okay, fair enough, that works. Other citations it gave me, it's not in there. So particularly when I'm writing articles like this, or when I'm doing things like this, I have to be really careful not to just cite things blindly, because some of the stuff is made up. And in fact, some of the stuff was without me going in and doing a lot of research to vet it. So I left some statistics out as part of this program. Let's talk about just one thing that I had. I said, when's the date of, when's the date of a claims bar date? And it said claims have to be filed within 6 months from date of death or within 2 months after the mailing of notice, whichever is later. That's incorrect. And if I had relied on that, I would have committed malpractice. And so I wrote down and I said, totally incorrect. It's whichever's earlier, 6 months or the date, 2 months after the notice. So it said, thanks for correcting that, but it still inherently didn't fix the problem. So I suspect now, I have seen these have gotten a lot better, even in the last 6 months when this was made. I doubt it would still give me a bad result like this. I don't, maybe. But this is an example of what you have to be cautious of. And it's not theoretical. Judges are already responding. The courts are responding. So here's the cases. They're losing admissions. They're being disqualified from cases. It's nasty business. And LexisNexis, in its own self-promotion of its AI, is just saying it's a matter of time before they lose their license over open source AI, which is sort of alluding to some problems. So why is this happening with lawyers? Why do we see this with lawyers? Well, I'll tell you, one of the reasons is because legal specific hallucination rates are higher than normal hallucination rates. Right now, ChatGPT 5, which was released in October 2025, is 2% error prone until you get to legal questions. And then it's 25% error prone. This was a study done. They were doing some testing. This was a study done. That's an incredible knowledge gap and problem that back in the old days, and it does say back in 2020, mid 23, 24, 65%, I can tell you that was true. 25%, I can tell you that's probably true, because that's about what I'm seeing today. I am seeing remarkable improvements with the hallucination rates, but I'm still seeing at least 25% hallucination in research that I'm doing. And so you have to be aware of this. If you do nothing else, remember this from this program. No AI exception. You sign, you certify that you've read those cases. This is the Maryland courts in the Mazu case said it was a travesty in the profession. And it said that this is something that's going to be a problem. In Maryland, it's going to be a court sanction or a referral to the Attorney General, or I'm sorry, the Grievance Committee. I don't know what the agency is. It should be just the Grievance Committee, the Bar Grievance Committee. This is a case that in the Mazu case that came out in Maryland. This is probably one of the most uncomfortable arguments I've ever watched. It just so happened that the children in the background, the kids in the background, I would say children, they were actually, I think, law school, college students or law students observing the proceedings. And they watched this gentleman basically prostrate himself to the court and explain how he made a mistake and how 11 of the citations in his brief were made up and were completely false because he didn't read it. And that's just astounding. He's not alone though, and that's really what I want to stress is he did this, but it's easy because when you get those citations, it looks legitimate. There was a case, Butler Snow, super high-end, big law, probably $1,000 an hour just for associates, and they beefed it, and they had something like 20 plus cases that went through 4 or 5 partners on the letterhead, on the pleading. And they got tagged. And I read the citations and they looked like, they had like Westlaw citations with the stars and with the pagination pinpoint sites. It was absolutely astounding. If I read it, I would have believed it, but then when you look the cases up, they don't exist. So I'm not going to play that. I want to keep boogieing. Database, 888 cases have been tracked through April of 2026. This is the one that's been tracked. These aren't the ones that don't get tracked. 102 cases with disciplinary referrals and over 145,000 in monetary penalties. That's insane. You've got to be really careful. Should it scare you? Absolutely. Healthy fear keeps you from getting in trouble. Should you avoid AI? Absolutely not. AI is going to revolutionize how we practice law. It is just, obviously, if you've got a fake site from AI, if you read what it's producing and read that case, you realize it's fake, and then you have to go start from it and find a better case. That's how it works. So you just have to be careful how you approach it and use it. And that's really fundamentally the ethics idea of competency. And that's why I put all of this under competency. One of the things in that court case was the court was talking about how much time they spent chasing down dead end cases. And they said, this is not what we want to be doing. But you should be able to use AI. And I would think if you don't, you're really missing out on a tremendous productivity boost. So let's go to the next question, confidentiality. I think the general rule of thumb years ago, I say years ago is maybe a year ago, was you have to redact everything and remove identifiable information. So under confidentiality, a lawyer should not reveal information unless given informed consent. What the American Bar Association has a reasonableness test for confidentiality. Have you taken reasonable steps to keep that information confidential? That was something that they did with emails, and now they've sort of drawn that through AI. But they have a rule that actually puts in reasonableness into that test. But I've seen some cases in Maryland that actually apply reasonableness as well, even though it's not in our rules. So the idea is, would a prudent lawyer find it safe for client data? After all, we're not HIPAA compliant with our emails. We're not HIPAA compliant with exchange of information with opposing counsel, with our clients. We don't have to do MFA with emails like doctors. So we do what's called reasonable. We have a little bit of a less of a standard than that. So modicum of confidentiality, or making sure that you just meet that base standard. And it's my belief that you fully meet those base standards using AI with what we're talking about here in a second. So the first thing I want to do is, can you comply with that and use AI? Yes. You can't use consumer grade. Do not use free AI as a lawyer and put client information in. If you use free consumer grade, just don't put anything in that says your client's information, because there's a risk of leakage, because the American Bar Association has already said that risk of leakage causes a problem with attorney-client confidentiality. Why does it affect confidentiality? Because you're basically consumer grade, you're allowing it to use your input to train its models. So it becomes fundamentally a part of its patterns, and they're seeing where chunks of data are actually being spit back out into the stream of output. I myself have had that personal experience. I was doing something with ChatGPT probably a year and a half ago, and it cited a language on a rule, and it said, here's the rule, whatever, or the case. And I was looking at, again, verifying. I was looking at the rule, and I was reading the annotations to the cases in the Westlaw book, and it was verbatim, word for word, of that citation from the annotation. Now you talk about, I didn't want to get into copyright, but I was spooked. And that's the risk of using consumer grade AI as opposed to legal grade. And then obviously, if it's free, your client's paying for it. This is the opinion. If you want to take a screenshot of that or look that up later, This says that AI cannot be used if it's used for model training. That's the critical part. And now you can opt out and have security without model training, where it's much more secure than what the ABA was concerned about in its formal opinion 512, written in July of 2024. In fact, interestingly, I researched the availability of non-model training in July of 2024, and there was at least 2 models that were already out there that did not use model training that weren't reflected in their opinion because it was so new. And so that really is just talking about the speed of development in the courts and the lawyers and everybody else trying to keep up with it. So what do? You make sure you've got end-to-end encryption. You check data use policies. Every single provider has a data use. Ensure it's not used for model training under your data use. Verify retention and controls. Who retains it and how long? Most of the higher security grades will not retain it more than 30 days, and they only do it for compliance purposes. They can access it for certain reasons, but the idea is so can Microsoft on your SharePoint or OneDrive account. And lawyers know that's been found to be perfectly acceptable to have data stored in the cloud, because it's very unlikely, again, that reasonableness that they're going to access it, take advantage. That does go to an issue of confidentiality, that if you have a very sensitive matter eventually involving national security or a rock star, you wouldn't want to use publicly stored data locations or use AI because of the risk of somebody finding out about it and exploiting that sharing of information. Look for the DPA's data, the data privacy agreements. Look for those or written assurances, and then document your diligence. When the bar association asks you how did you do this when that leak occurs, you say, look, I looked at all these things. I took an AI program. This is what he told me to look for. I looked for it. I did my due diligence. This is a really important part. Audit vendor updates. AI terms change. We had Claude in October. It used to be that Claude Pro was confidential, and then it wasn't. And you had to turn it off, and you had to turn off model training. It was interesting because the AI task force had Claude as an acceptable model, Claude Pro, on its website, and I had to tell them, you got to take this down. It's no longer correct because of the because the terms change. They're changing all the time, but typically when you get to business level purchases, that's really where you're going to be protected from really even those term changes. This is a spreadsheet, and it talks about the data protection. Copilot, that is not to be confused with your regular Copilot on your computer. You have to pay for it. It's about $10 extra a month. It actually, there's some ability at enterprise tier to be HIPAA compliant, which is the gold standard. But if you pay that $10 an extra a month for the 365 Business Copilot, you're gonna be protected. Not used to train models, fully encrypted. Retention is very appropriate, and it's also covered by Microsoft DPA and also Microsoft 365 compliance. Same thing with Google Business. Again, I think it's called something else now. I don't think it's called, or I'm sorry, Gemini Business. That's right. It's called Gemini Business. And that's the same thing. And then ChatGPT Business. Notice how it has business after it. Claude Business, that also has it. SuperGrok, that was the one at the time I did this program in October. It did not have a program that was available. It does have one now, but I think it's, quote, enterprise grade. And I'm not sure on the cost because I haven't really gone into it, because I think giving you 4 other options is more than enough. Let me give you a little trap that you might be aware of. Thumbs up trap. Don't say you like or dislike an answer when you're using confidential data, because guess what? That goes to the company. So no matter how much you want to help them do their model improvement, you got to stay away from that, because it can be looked at by people. It can become part of the model training. You just stay away from it. I could use it for something like this. In fact, I have. I'll click the thumbs up and thumbs down, but this is a really big trap. Make sure you do not share likes or dislike on responses, no matter how many times they prompt you, which is every time. Just never use it. Key security, ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, all these business tiers are model, free or pro are insufficient. Again, even with Copilot, which you would think, oh, that's good. No, it's not. Zero privacy on consumer models. Just remember that. There's another way when you go to settings in whatever you're using, you can go into privacy. I think it depends which one you're in, but it says privacy. You can click off model training and that's going to protect you. You just click that off. But I still, for the encryption and the storage features, I'm going to really tell you, look at the business tiers. Don't rely on the consumer grade. Tier matters, and there you go. Legal specific tools, you don't even need to worry about it. They're going to be compliant, but you're going to pay for it. Always confirm no model training, limited retention, and encryption before use. You got to understand it. My real world uses, I use it to think about case strategy, trial outlines. I use it to troubleshoot issues with Microsoft 365, Windows, Time Matters, which I don't use anymore. Now I use Clio. I use it to help me troubleshoot Clio and other software. And I use it for personal support, like planning my 30th wedding anniversary, which is coming up in a few months. A notable example was I wanted to come up with a Latin phrase for, while I'm branding based on my move. And so it came up with some different ideas. So that was kind of fun. So that's it. I'm not sure how long this program was. I think it was going to be about, it was going to be an hour, but I was going to set aside some extra time for questions. So I'll leave this materials up on the screen, and I'm going to turn back to the Bar Association. Rachel, are you there? Hello?
I think Carly was actually manning the Zoom.
Yeah, sorry, I'm here.
That's okay. I'm sorry, Carly. I was just seeing Rachel. I maybe thought she jumped on at some point. So if people have questions, do you want to work on? I guess they can unmute themselves. We can. I guess we can do it that way. If people just want to unmute themselves and ask a question.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. I got a question. Which of the four options was most user? And by the way, if you don't want to talk out your idea, it's funny. You can put it into chat in your question, and I'll answer it in chat. And this is really a good time. You're going to get, the mind of a madman, as it were. I've been doing AI for almost going on 3 years and really understand it inside and out. So it's a good time to ask questions. But the question is, of the four models that I'm looking at, ChatGPT, Claude, Copilot, and Gemini, which one's the best for beginning AI? It's hard because I think the rule that I kind of hit the ground with when I started kind of really researching the different models was Claude was the one that was best for legal drafting. I started with ChatGPT, and I find ChatGPT very good. I found that when I first started with Gemini and Microsoft Copilot, they were goofy. Like, you would ask it a legal kind of question to say, can you draft this or answer this question? It would spit up it's beyond my rules. I can't answer this question. I can't do this. It's legal, whatever. But I had Copilot draft a document, like a legal pleading, like some kind of, I forgot what it was. It was some kind of motion, and it was brilliant. And I was like, wow. I do find Copilot to be very clunky. I find it to be slower. But I do find that when I'm asking it questions about my Outlook and my document database, it's really good and fast, much faster than ChatGPT. ChatGPT would be great. If you have ChatGPT Business, you can do what's called connections. And we talked about that on that one slide where you said integrates with Outlook and Microsoft. you can actually integrate it and you can say, look at my emails and tell me the 10 most important emails that I need to respond to today. And it will, it'll do that. Copilot does that as well. Claude does not integrate that way, and Gemini does not integrate that way, unless you're using Google, the Google ecospace, in which case those both integrate there. So for me, I use Copilot just to kind of look at emails, look at documents, find out information, summarize the status of cases. I mean, I had this one client, drove me crazy, would send me an email every day, maybe 2, maybe 3. And then we would talk and say, did you see my email? And I'm like, no. It's like, you send me 3 emails a day. I'm not going to read every email and charge you for reading it every day. So what I started to do is I'd go on to Copilot and I would say, summarize every email from this gentleman, and I put his name in, for the last month, the last 30 days. And then I'd have it in front of me. I would shoot a copy to him. I'd say, here's a summary of all the emails we're going to talk about today. Tell me which ones you want to still talk about. And it was great. And he was so happy. And then I didn't have to read all the emails because he could see it, and the verification, because we talk about verification, because that is important, because I'm relying on AI to digest those emails correctly. He's the verification that I'm asking for, because I'm sending it to him. Here's a summary prepared of your emails. Take a look at it and let me know what you want to talk about. So he can go, and if he doesn't see something, he can come back and say, I didn't see this. I've never had that happen. But that's pretty cool. So answering the question, I think ChatGPT is really great for beginners. Gemini is excellent. It's the most accurate, particularly with case sites, because it has such a bigger database, but its case sites are still wrong occasionally. And by the way, I have found that I was writing a brief last week, and I remember I had a point of law I needed to get, and I think I was using Gemini. 4 cases cited, 3 of which were accurate. The 4th case absolutely didn't exist. Actually, I think it was 5 cases and 2 cases didn't exist. And this was last week. There's a concept that's being really aggressively implemented across the board for all these models, which is called RAG. It's like retrieval augmented generation. What it does is it creates the answer and then it checks the answer against what's out there. So it goes back and double checks the answer. And that application has started to really reduce the instance of hallucination. And so I think you're going to see that that's kind of how it's being resolved. My hunch is that these hallucination concerns will be a thing like fax machines. It'll be a thing of the past in the next 2 years. It is changing so rapidly. I think that hallucinations are just going to go away. Yeah, ChatGPT I think would be good to use. And then the others you can just kind of use as is. And you can try different ones and see which one you like best. Be patient with them. Next week we'll actually talk about I guess in May, we're going to do a program on actually how to use these. And I'll show you how to sort of train it to help you. And so it knows what you're looking for. And so there we go. All right. I guess that's it. No other questions? All right. Thank you, guys. And you can always call me offline or email me offline. Thanks, guys. And good luck with this. It's fun. It's worth doing.